Hello.
Welcome back to the Space Gulag. Today we'll be doing What If Revan Trained Luke. Before we begin, special thanks to all of our patrons. The next part of our mini-series comes out on Saturday.
Our story begins in the final year of the Jedi Civil War, in the year 3956 BPY. We find our heroes on the outer rim world of Tatooine, as they search for the Rakkadan star map inside of the cave of a legendary Krayt Dragon.
Revan and Bastila Shan were walking through the barren deserts of Tatooine. They found themselves in the eastern Dune Sea. They had recently been the ones to kill a Krayt Dragon in the desert, though the only reason Revan and Bastila killed the Krayt Dragon was because it was hunting them. They didn't originally intend on killing the large reptile, but they had no other choice. The two of them walked towards a large structure that sat out in the desert. The structure was a formation of rocks, but on the inside was a Rakkadan star map. The two Jedi had come for the map so they could stop the evil Lord Malak before he and his forces destroyed the galaxy via the usage of the Star Forge. When the two entered the cave, Revan felt a call to do something. Ever since he returned from serving the Sith, he'd been keeping a memoir with him, a Jedi holocron outlining all of his emotions and how he dealt with his transfer from Republic soldier to Jedi. It outlined all of his training with the Jedi and all of his emotions, now as a Jedi. Revan didn't believe that it was finished, but it felt like the Force was telling him to leave the holocron here, for whatever reason, inside the cave. So, Revan assumed it would be a guide for the future. Maybe, maybe not. Bastila and Revan grabbed their piece of the Rakkadan star map, and before they left, Revan ignited his lightsaber, cut a hole in the side of the rocks inside the cave, and sat down his holocron. When Bastila asked him what he was doing, Revan explained that he was making sure whoever needed to find it would find it, as he looked at the holocron and followed her out of the cave. The year is 12 BBY on the planet of Tatooine, and a young man raised out in the desert is out on an adventure. Both of his parents were Jedi, and he was raised with the Tusken Raiders in the Dune Sea. Asharad Het knew the Dune Seas very well, and from time to time he would journey into the wastelands or into Krayt Dragon caves for fun. He knew he was very Force-sensitive because he'd been trained by his parents from a young age, but he also was an adventurer. He loved going out into the seas of the Dune Sea. He knew Tatooine just as well as the Tusken Raiders did, and he loved it. During this particular outing, Asharad went east into the Dune Sea. He had, for the longest part of his life, been told to avoid that part of the Dune Sea because of how common it was to see a Krayt Dragon alive out there, though they were rare. They typically hunted banthas because nothing else across Tatooine would really feed them. Asharad came across the Dune Sea sand, traveling for days, another great adventure for him. The entire time he'd been on Tatooine, he'd never seen a living Krayt Dragon. Of course, he knew of the relics of the dragon that had been sitting across the seas for centuries. Apparently, it had been killed by Jedi, and it saved generations of Tusken Raiders. Regardless, Asharad was looking for his first Krayt Dragon, and then he came across a cave. The cave was large and dark. When Asharad entered, the two suns slowly vanished and his eyes began to adjust to the darkness inside the cave. He made sure to be wary of a possible beast. He carried a lightsaber, but he rarely used it. The lightsaber was a gift by his parents. Without his knowledge, his parents had been trying to track him down, to let him know that they were leaving Tatooine to help the Jedi on the run from the Purge, but they couldn't find him. Asharad walked through the cave, and he found a small hole in the wall. As he walked up to it, he put his hand in blindly. Asharad was trusting the Force to get here, because as much as he wanted to see a Krayt Dragon, he didn't really want to play with one. When he reached in, he grabbed out a cubed rock, and so he brought it out. The cube had a dim blue glow to it, and Asharad pulled it into his arms. When he did, he was sent back to a time long before him, and he saw an evil man striking down civilizations, burning people away. Asharad fell back of his feet, and he ignited his lightsaber and looked around. He could hear voices. While Asharad hadn't access to holocron, he was tapping into the light and the dark side of the Force from the one who left the holocron here. Revan hadn't intended on leaving his essence behind with so much negativity, but it was inextricably connected to him, as he was a balance of light and dark. Asharad may have been raised by Jedi, but there sat a very powerful darkness within him. It was very common for those raised in the sands of Tatooine to have darkness. The planet had a negative aura around it, and it surrounded those who were adept with the Force, especially those who at the time of their connection to Tatooine weren't able to process the darkness that resonated inside the planet. There was a terrible scream heard from the edge of the tunnel, and Asharad jumped from his feet and started to run. As he sheathed his lightsaber, he may or may not have actually awoken a Krayt Dragon with his insatiable timing. The dragon had a tendency to go in and out of hibernation, and at the moment the beast was enjoying its hibernation until the sound of an echo of a lightsaber drew it from his rest. Asherad got to the mouth of the cave, being blinded by the brightness of the twin suns, but he saw two outlined individuals, one of them telling him to get down, as the other used the force and threw Asherad away from the mouth of the cave. Two lightsabers ignited, as a rumbling around the ground opened up, and a screech could be heard as the all-powerful Krayt Dragon came out and slammed down, creating a seismic event, throwing both Asherad parents off their feet. The two Jedi got up, and moved in to defend themselves, without hurting the Krayt Dragon. They knew it was just an innocent animal trying to protect itself, but they also needed to make sure their son got away safely, while at the same time, they had a chance to get themselves away to safety as well. When the Krayt Dragon turned his attention to Asherad's parents, their lives were essentially over. They may have been Jedi, but they were by no means exceptionally talented Jedi. The two of them did everything in their power before they were crushed by the Krayt Dragon. Asherad, on the other hand, did everything he could, slashing at the tail of the Krayt Dragon with his lightsaber. But when the dragon felt the pinch on his tail, it flipped the tail backwards and sent Asherad flying and slamming down into the sands of Tatooine with a broken vertebrae. Asherad wouldn't wake up for several days. When he eventually woke up, he couldn't move. He couldn't see his parents, and it was pitch black across the sands of Tatooine. There wasn't even a sign of anything remaining. As he tried to get up, he couldn't move. His back was completely paralyzed, and as he looked over towards the entrance of the cave, he saw the boots of his parents. There was a glimmer off the moonlight, some sort of liquid on the boots. As Asherad realized what it was, he screamed out in anger. His parents were dead, and it was because of him. All that powerful darkness he felt from the stone he found inside the cave rushed through his veins, and anger lifted him like a possessed man. He was still badly injured, but he walked over towards the remains of what used to be his parents and buried them. Instead of honoring his parents, he ignited his lightsaber and walked into the cave of the Krayt Dragon to slay the beast. On the other side of Tatooine, a former Jedi Master rose from his sleep. Obi-Wan knew that there were other Jedi on the planet, but this was not a Jedi. There was a dark essence in the Force. Kenobi never slept well because of his nightmares, though for Obi-Wan, he knew that this essence didn't belong to Sidious. Obi-Wan may have been cut off from the Force, but it by no means didn't mean that he couldn't sense things around him or even feel them. This surge of darkness could raise the least Force-sensitive person in the galaxy from their sleep with goosebumps and chills. Kenobi decided to make sure Luke was alright as he made his way towards the lookout over the moisture farm to see if anything was wrong. It was obvious there was nothing wrong, and so he took a deep breath and tried to find peace with himself before going back to sleep. Something that didn't happen because he spent so much time trying to communicate to his old master. Qui-Gon never answered, and Obi-Wan couldn't sleep after ever being awoken. By morning, Kenobi returned to his day job, cutting meat and partaking in the jury lifestyle that was not accustomed to a Jedi. While Kenobi may have been returning to work, on the other side of the Dune Sea, walking from the cave of the Krayt Dragon, was a man. No more a man. He was no longer the good kid that his parents raised. His self-loathing drove him beyond his own capabilities, alongside the essence of one of the most powerful Sith Lords the galaxy had ever seen. The man named Asherad was gone, and in his place was a new Sith to challenge the rule of Palpatine, that Sith Lord being named Darth Krayt, named after the beast that took everything from him, including his dignity. When Krayt left the cave in the morning, he saw trails. It was the Jawas. They had seemingly taken his rock, but truthfully, Krayt no longer wanted that wasteful piece of Dune Sea history that got his parents killed. And so, Darth Krayt started walking towards the nearest spaceport so he could go challenge the Sith. The holocron would sit dormant inside of a Jawa sandcrawler for months upon months. It would travel across the Dune Sea. It would show itself in markets and would pop up in front of moisture farms. None of them wanted it. Because the Jawas couldn't sell it, they passed it on to another tribe of Jawas. One of the Jawas, named Tika, was a female in her tribe, and she thought she had the perfect hobo to sell it to. Tika had many interactions with Ben Kenobi, and so she went to talk to Ben about the possibility of him buying this really cool rock that was super colorful. Tika knew the chances of making the sale were really low, but when she entered Kenobi's cave, she was pleasantly surprised to see Ben openly purchasing the magic rock. Truthfully, Tika was like any other Jawa, trying to turn a profit, and Kenobi was just another customer that fell upon their upselling prices. Regardless, the Jawas finally got rid of the Jedi holocron, and that holocron was now sat safely inside the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi. He took the holocron and sat it inside of his chest. Obi-Wan hadn't been using the Force, and the only reason he took this was in case the Inquisitors or the Empire found themselves on Tatooine. They wouldn't assume that the Jedi were on the planet. With him having bought it, there was no chance that the Inquisitors or the Empire would assume that there were Jedi on the planet. Truthfully, Ben bought the holocron not just to keep himself safe, or Luke safe, but the Jawas, any other Jedi on the planet, and essentially the rest of the population. Kenobi may have not been up to date on galactic news, but people talked. They talked about the siege of Minban, the disappearance of the Kaminoans, the raids of Sereno and Raxus. All these events were just more propaganda for the Empire and more stuff for people to talk about. But Obi-Wan heard the information enough that he took the holocron to keep the people of Tatooine safe from any of those Imperial operations. Kenobi, having put the holocron in his chest, would avoid thinking about it, but the truth is, he couldn't avoid it. The essence that rang off the holocron was way too much for even him. Kenobi went to work with the thought of it on his mind the entire day. There was a severe risk of unveiling his ability to use the Force. The Empire had been getting closer to the Outer Rim, and just the day before there was a Jedi who tried to communicate with him. Kenobi wasn't entirely sure if the Inquisitors were on Tatooine or not, but the truth is, they were. And they were searching for the Jedi named Nari. When Kenobi left work, he found Nari hung in the town square. It was shameful. Obi-Wan tried to give him a chance to escape the planet, but he didn't take it. Hiding would have served Nari much better than facing the Empire by himself. Kenobi sent the message to everyone, to avoid the Empire, to stay hidden. Regardless, when he returned to his cave, he had come in contact with Bail and Breha Organa. Obi-Wan was requested to go and save Leia Organa, who had been abducted. While this would eventually lead to a chain of events, before Bail came to Tatooine, Kenobi would open himself up to the Force and access the artifact, seeing what its true potential held. While Kenobi was attuned enough to the Force that he could handle the balance that sat in handling the artifact, he realized upon opening it that it was full of light. While Kenobi was accessorizing with the artifact, listening to the messages it had, he was visited by Bail Organa, and he would agree to the mission to save Leia. After several days, Kenobi would return from a fight with Darth Vader and saving the Princess of Alderaan, and would decide that he would, in a way, respect Owen's decision. Kenobi picked apart the holocron that he had and took away the imbalance of the most outer part of the holocron. Kenobi then took apart the Skyhopper that he was going to give to Luke and then placed the holocron inside of the toy. The most important piece of the holocron, the piece of the holocron that would teach Luke everything he needed to learn about the Force, as it showed all of Revan's teachings and all of his lessons that he learned on the path to recovery. Obi-Wan knew of Revan, but it was very limited knowledge of the Jedi from thousands of years before. But all the information inside the holocron would be a great tool for Luke to use, because only Luke, being Force sensitive, would be able to access these files, whereas Owen and Beru, if they handled the toy, wouldn't access anything. So when Obi-Wan moved locations from the cave to a more suitable house, he gave Luke the Skyhopper toy, knowing that if Luke were anything like his father, he would realize his true power by accident, and come to access it through that. Owen wouldn't think anything about this toy, and Kenobi would disappear into the desert, after giving a heroic hello there to the son of Anakin. As he traveled through the desert, he ran into his master, Qui-Gon Jinn, finally having the opportunity to talk to his master once again. Luke loved his Skyhopper toy, because he chased adventure. He imagined that he drove pod racers and starfighters when he wasn't working on the farm. Luke craved adventure, and soon after playing with his Skyhopper toy, he began to have dreams, very vivid dreams of the future, and having an astromech, a starfighter, and being a hero. It was like he became a mythical figure, something Luke always believed he was destined for. While Owen told Luke that his father was a navigator on a spice freighter, that was far from the truth. The more Owen and Beru tried to shield their son from the Force, and the lineage of which he came from, the more they pushed him towards it. Luke was his father's son. He wanted adventure, and he wanted to be free from Tatooine and see the entire galaxy. Though, once these dreams started, they only got more intense, with each dream revealing something new to Luke about himself and the Force he had within him. Luke was very entranced with these possibilities. When he wasn't with his father, he began holding brooms and using them like laser swords he saw in his dreams. The Force worked in mysterious ways, and Luke was experiencing how mysterious they could be. Though as the Force started to open up within Luke, he began to tap into a legacy of power that sat within him. He experimented with his eyes closed before he went to sleep, pushing and pulling objects across the room, closing his eyes and being able to see everything in his room, outside his room, and all the way out to the moisture farm. Luke's vision was heightening, and it was only a matter of time until he would expand it far greater than it already was. Luke, once asleep, would have balance between lucid dreaming and vivid dreaming. During Luke's vivid dreams, he would interact with Revan and Qui-Gon Jinn. Luke met both of them during separate times, and he learned their names relatively quickly. Though when he had lucid dreams, he communicated with each of them respectfully, asking them questions about what he was feeling and garnering a new understanding of his powers. Though Luke made a specific point to hide this information from Uncle Owen, he didn't think Beru would have an issue with it, but he didn't want to test that theory. While powerful light was growing in the Outer Rim, the core was growing darker by the millisecond. Sidious was very disappointed in his students' failure to best Kenobi, and even more than that, his students' inability to see clearly. Sidious learned from the Grand Inquisitor that Lord Vader ordered the Star Destroyer to follow Kenobi's vessel instead of the rest of the path. It was Vader who was unable to defeat Kenobi a second time, and it was Vader who cost the Empire resources in chasing the path, only to leave it empty-handed by chasing Kenobi. Though it's not like the resources lost in chasing the path were all that significant to the Empire. It was more so the fact that the Empire chased down a singular Jedi for its head Jedi Hunter to be made a fool of. It was a disappointment to Lord Sidious, but the new information he learned about Vader wasn't the greatest disturbance to him. It was the growing darkness on his side of the galaxy. With Vader on Mustafar, there was no feasible opponent other than an unknown foe for Palpatine to face. But there was a foe that Sidious hadn't yet heard about. The Dark Lord of the Sith told his guardsmen to prepare themselves and batten down the hatches. The guards listened, but they didn't really understand the fear, considering they were on Coruscant, which was the most defended planet in the entire galaxy. Though a small starfighter landed in the city streets of Coruscant, Darth Krayt walked through the streets of the city. During the very long trip through hyperspace, he meditated on the dark side, focusing on what evilness resonated inside the holocron he touched so long ago. Ever since the death of his parents, he prepared himself to kill the only challenges to his power. Krayt could feel Sidious was his rival because Palpatine was the Emperor, but the issue is he didn't know about Vader, because Vader wasn't in the public image. He was only known to those in the military. Darth Krayt, by touching a holocron, gained some, but not all, of the memories of Revan, and some of those memories gave him information on the secrets of the Jedi Temple here on Coruscant, its secret access points, and so forth. Krayt entered through the lower access ports of the Jedi Temple, now being the Emperor's castle. Krayt could feel the Emperor's power, and it empowered him. Krayt fed off the dark side of the Force in the same way that Windu could use the dark side of the Force against his opponents. Krayt fed off the power of his opponent, especially a dark side opponent. Being that Palpatine was so powerful, Krayt drew on this power in the dark side and allowed it to course through his body as he made his way towards the throne room, located in the former High Council chambers. When Krayt exited the hinted tunnels, he could see royal guards placed sporadically throughout the facility. He wasn't too concerned with them. If they came after him, then they would just be slaughtered. But his main objective was the Sith Lord. Palpatine, on the other hand, rose from his throne and stood in his power, dismissing his guards towards the elevator. When they got to the elevator, the doors flew open, and the guards' bodies were thrown through the walls into Palpatine's room. The Sith Lord stood tall, watching his opponent walk towards him. Palpatine demanded to know who this was that stood before him. Krayt stepped forward and didn't say a word. Palpatine knew this would be a fight between the Force, seeing as Krayt's first move wasn't to grab his lightsaber, which he had two on his belt. Sidious shot lightning at Krayt immediately. Krayt moved out of the way as the lightning hit a panel and exploded. Krayt shot lightning at Sidious, and the Dark Lord used his own lightning as he shot back at him, and the two Siths' lightning interlocked. This was a fight of the Force and of strength. Krayt started to gain an advantage only due to having drawing off of Palpatine's power. But Palpatine was a tactical genius. He knew what was happening as he spun forward over, igniting both of his lightsabers. Krayt fell backwards and ignited his own lightsaber, blocking Sidious. Sidious may have been old and damaged, but he wasn't helpless. Krayt stumbled backwards as he got to his feet and blocked every swing coming his way. Krayt knew in a dueling scenario he wouldn't be able to defeat this Sith Lord, and so using everything in his power, he pushed Sidious back. Krayt used the Force to pull objects across the room towards Sidious, but every time an object got close, Sidious cut it into pieces, turning all of his attention towards Krayt as he swung and cut through Krayt's arm, and the Sith from the desert fell backwards. Sidious stood over Krayt, calling him a fraud for believing he could challenge the rule of the Sith. Krayt crawled backwards, looking for a way out as he watched Sidious raise his blade and strike down on him. Krayt kicked his foot up as Sidious jabbed down through the bottom of his foot through his entire leg. Sidious ripped the lightsaber out, and before he could land the final killing blow, Krayt shot lightning forward as it flew into Sidious's face. The Dark Lord fell to his knees as Krayt rolled around and swung his lightsaber through Sidious's legs, and as Sidious fell backwards, Krayt drove his blade forward and slashed through Sidious's face. Krayt laid his head back and took a deep breath. There was no feasible way that he could have won that battle, but he did. Using the Force to put Sidious's lightsaber on his belt, he hobbled to his feet and made his way for a great escape. On Mustafar, Vader felt Palpatine's death and immediately got out of his bacta tank so that he could travel to Coruscant to do damage control. Vader's son, on the other hand, stood in the doorway of his homestead. It was nighttime. He could hear the whistling of the winds and he could feel the sand blowing into his clothes. Luke had a backpack on, and inside was a skyhopper. But it was nighttime. It wasn't day. Luke was awoken by a dream, and he was a child possessed. He knew what he needed to do, and where he needed to go, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for such a journey. The dream told him to head due west from the homestead and find a man by the name of Ben Kenobi. This was a message from Qui-Gon. The message from Revan was to bring the skyhopper. Luke was very afraid as he stood at the door. He was technically running away from home. The systems were turned on, and so if he ran, he would set off all the defense systems at the homestead. But if he turned the systems off, they would leave Owen and Beru unguarded. So Luke waited until the night was almost over, and he escaped into the darkness after turning off the system. Luke was ready for this adventure, but he was also very nervous. So he ran out into the desert under the cover of night. He could feel where he was going, as if he was being led by his own intuition. The voice in his head gave him confidence that no matter where he went, he'd be protected. Kenobi was unaware of this particular circumstance, and so when he felt the presence of Skywalker approaching in the middle of the night, he knew the holocron must have worked. Kenobi wrapped himself up in his robes and exited the homestead as he walked outside and searched for Luke. Kenobi had to be extra careful, because he didn't know if the Tuskens would be out on the prowl or not. Kenobi was well known by the Tuskens, and they left him alone for the most part. Kenobi looked down into a valley and saw a little boy walking. In his backpack, Kenobi could see the Skyhopper toy that he gave him. Ben moved down the side of his abode and got down in front of Luke and called out to him. Luke saw Ben and recognized him from the first time they met, not too long beforehand. Luke asked Ben if he was the one that he was meant to find. Ben nodded his head, saying,
"If the Force guided you to me, then I am the one you were meant to find."
Luke started forward, following Obi-Wan back up to the homestead. Kenobi made sure that Luke was alright and situated before asking Luke why he came here. When Kenobi got the question out, Luke informed him that he was told to. He kept having dreams, and two men told him to come here. Luke said that Obi-Wan likely wouldn't know the names, to which Obi-Wan told Luke to tell him what the names were, because he might know. Luke responded saying that Revan was one of them, and Qui-Gon Jinn was the other. Kenobi leaned back in his chair with a smile on his face. He looked up, and then looked back down at Luke, saying,
"Well, Luke, I do know them. Master Jinn was my master, and Revan was an ancient Jedi. Very powerful, very wise, just like your father."
Luke responded immediately, asking about his father. See, Ben knew that Luke would come, and it was just a matter of time until the holocron drove him here. Maybe it was wrong, but Owen was holding Luke back. Obi-Wan knew better than to hold back a Skywalker, so giving this holocron to Luke was ensuring that Luke would make the right choice for himself. If Luke didn't make the choice, then so be it, but because Luke came looking for answers, he was making the choice to start his journey as a Jedi. Accessing the holocron, while unintentional, gave Luke information he could have never gotten through Owen and Beru. Luke knew that his uncle and aunt were lying about his father, and the more his dreams happened, the more the holocron fed him information. The more adept he also became. Obi-Wan at this point knew he could tell Luke about his father.
"Luke, what your uncle told you about your father was wrong. Anakin Skywalker was a powerful Jedi Knight. He was not just a cunning warrior, but a great friend. But a pupil of mine by the name of Darth Vader betrayed and murdered your father. Vader was consumed by the dark side of the Force. I truly miss your father, Luke."
Luke looked at Ben. Luke, being so adept with the Force, could almost see into Ben's mind, and he saw glimpses, pictures almost, of what Ben was thinking about, what Ben was seeing. And Luke asked, "Who is the man behind the mask?" Obi-Wan snapped out of his nightmare and looked at Luke and leaned forward. Obi-Wan didn't actually think Luke would catch on to the Force so quickly, but because he was so young, he picked up on the Force a lot quicker. If he had been older, it would have taken him much more time. But Luke was just a boy, and he didn't have the same baggage as a young adult would have had. His mind was a sponge to the Force, so Ben told Luke what he saw.
"The man behind the mask is your father, Luke. When I last saw him, I thought I could save Anakin. But there's too much Vader in him. There was a brief moment where I saw my friend, the good man that was your father, but he disappeared before my eyes, consumed by Vader."
Luke looked at Ben and then asked him if his father was still alive. Ben nodded his head and then spoke up.
"I want to believe that Anakin is still alive. Maybe someday he'll see the light. But when I left him, there was none of that. There's too much hate in him.
Luke didn't really understand, but Kenobi moved on from the topic, asking Luke about his dreams, and what it is that he knew or why he came out here. Luke told Obi-Wan everything, and then continued telling Ben that he didn't want anything to do with his aunt or uncle. Luke loved them, in a way, but he thought they were all taking advantage of him. Luke believed, yes, that he should have chores and he should have responsibilities, but what he felt within him now felt as if he belonged somewhere else, not on a farm. Obi-Wan made a personal note that Luke was speaking beyond his years. It was very possible that the voice of Revan, or even the ever-elusive voice of Qui-Gon Jinn, got to him and opened him up in his mind. Obi-Wan knew that Revan was powerful, but maybe Revan had a lot more to share than Kenobi initially thought. Luke told Ben that he wanted to become a Jedi like his father, but he didn't want to go back to the farm. Maybe as a man, he could return and be friendly with the Lars, but right now, he knew he needed to have time to grow as an individual. Profound thoughts for someone not much older than 10 years old. Regardless, Ben agreed to these terms. Across the galaxy on Coruscant, Lord Vader arrived. He discovered the dead bodies of the royal guards, and that of Palpatine too. Vader knew that the responsibility of Sith Lord fell down onto him, and as for the role of Emperor, should he become the Emperor and kill all who oppose him, or should he allow Tarkin to become a puppet for him? As Vader thought about it, the doors behind him opened, and he turned around to see his favorite Imperial officer, the likely successor to the throne of Palpatine. Vader stood tall, and his presence was overbearing as he turned and looked down at Tarkin. The Governor was a close ally of Palpatine, just as close as anyone could get. Tarkin had the full support of the entire Imperial military complex, because he was the architect of it. Vader, on the other hand, was a ghost, never seen, never heard, and only feared. There were multiple ways for the Dark Lord of the Sith to play this, being that it was obvious by Sidish's wounds and the missing ligaments on the ground that the person who did this was no Jedi. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is end of part 1 of 2. Again, special thanks to Bender Wells, Tiger Boy, Darth Revan, Pimp Daddy Bane, Darth Cheesy, Apollo, Madman Studios, Anakin003, Lemon Knight from the Ben Cease, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Hit those links in the video. I don't know what's coming next, but it is. If you want to see what ifs, I don't know. They're all below. Next episode of the miniseries comes out on Saturday. Remember, each episode is something new in a continuous arc. Anyways, let's talk about our story real quick-a-rooney. This was fun. I didn't really know how I wanted this to go, but I kind of wanted to set it up where part 2 is going to be a little bit more actiony. This one's more of a setup because there is no feasible way for me to do like one episode for this one. This one's a 2-episode story. It's just the way I set it up just is too complex to do in one episode, and so I don't really have much else to say because everything I have to say is kind of like brainstorming towards what's going to come next because I'm not entirely sure what's going to come next. I still have to write that out, but this first part is a lot more eventful than I had ever intended on it becoming, and that's why it ended up becoming 2 parts. So I'm very excited about what comes next because I have some really cool ideas in my mind, and they're going to get written out like right after I finish editing this. So anyways, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.